Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian Sanabria, host of the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast and founder of the Defenders Initiative. Welcome to this webcast sponsored by Savient. Joining me today is Anirudh Sen, Senior VP of Products at Savient. How are you doing, Anirudh?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, good to have you. Looking forward to today's conversation. And today we are discussing identity-centric security. I'll be talking a lot about AI and the impact of AI on identity. But before we get to the main conversation, I want to direct the audience to some of the controls on your screen. If you look down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see 4 blue bubbles. The first of those is a chat button. Some of you have already found that and have been chiming in on where you're connecting in from. You can also use that to drop any questions you have as we go throughout the webcast today. And personally, I prefer when you drop in questions when they occur to you. That way we can, I'll be checking this periodically throughout the webinar, and we can answer your questions, hopefully within the context of the conversation when it was asked. I find that's a little bit easier than saving them all for the end. And we will have a demo towards the end also. I'll try and remind you to get your questions in if you have been saving any up. And then before we begin, I also want to direct you to the third blue bubble down there. That is the handouts window, and they are 3 handouts there. One of them is a URL, is a link, and the other 2 are PDFs. You can go ahead and grab those now or anytime during the webcast. All right, with that, let's get going, Anirudh. So the identity landscape today, pretty interesting space to be in, I would say right now. I think it was a couple of years ago, somebody told me that identity security was becoming a thing. And it just hit me like when was identity not part of security? But apparently in a lot of organizations, identity teams were separate from security teams. And, so we've kind of seen, I think maybe 2 years ago, because Cyber Risk Alliance also does Identiverse, owns the conference Identiverse. That kind of popped up as the key topic. And now as we get into agentic AI, it seems like identity is coming to the front again.
Yeah. Definitely. I think we could see the landscape changing already. In the last few years, there was obviously, you're right, identity has always been there. We have always known that, threat, one of the threat vectors that are commonly used is identity-led attacks, people impersonating others, phishing, and other things. But I will say that, in the last 3-4 years, everybody was sort of starting to use the same terminology. We could see that shifting. Everybody was talking about identity being the new perimeter. So we saw that shift happening a few years ago. And then obviously in the last 2 years, there has been such a massive adoption of AI, agentic AI, people adopting platforms that allow them to create AI agents. And now everybody's starting to wonder, okay, we had, I would say not the best controls over all of our identities, human identities. And now we have to deal with like AI agents, including all the non-human identities such as machines and workloads, which can also work pretty autonomously. So it is definitely interesting, the landscape. One of the other things I have seen is application explosion as well. Now, in the past, we would see the number of applications used by enterprises were not, I will say, not exceeding like 1,000, maybe 1,000, 1,500 or so. But now what we are seeing is that, specific lines of businesses, departments, they are empowered to go, create their own applications or adopt cloud services. So it's much more easy for an enterprise to, take on new applications or allow their finance and compliance team to buy new SaaS applications. So the application landscapes and what boundaries enterprises have to deal with have also, I will say, exploded. Not just identities, but like the landscape that those identities interact with have also exploded. Have you been seeing sort of a similar pattern on your end as well?
Yeah, back in the day, if you wanted to use a new application, sometimes you'd have to have IT deploy a server and deploy infrastructure for it. You'd run it on-prem, right? Now all you need is a web browser, and you probably don't even need to create a password. You just use the SSO sign up, and like within 2 seconds, you now have an account with a new product. And then another few clicks, and it's integrated with Microsoft 365 or
Exactly.
Google Workspace, and it has access to all your files and your calendar and all your email. Right? It's scary how easy it is to pull into new applications into the organization. I actually used to work for a SaaS security posture management vendor, and some of the data we had, I wrote a report for them, just shocking the number of applications, particularly ones that are unused, where somebody was like,
Yeah.
one day they said, let me try this out, and gave it access to all their stuff. Didn't like it, never
Yeah.
disconnected it, right? It's still integrated. That application and that company still have access to all your data.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think what has happened is that obviously for any business, productivity is important. Making sure that the users are effective. All of these are extremely important. But what at least what we are seeing is that generally the infrastructure to support all of these different types of data, application interactions, isn't necessarily scaling at the same pace. So what you end up or what we end up seeing a lot of times is that the quality of data, quality of visibility into the environments, or the sort of the interactions that these identities are having with your data, applications, your assets, generally the controls aren't effective. And so you have this kind of dichotomy where you are adopting all of these services at a breakneck pace, but you don't necessarily have the right controls in place to actually effectively scale your business. So, or securely scale your business is the right word I want to use. But yeah, that's definitely, it's a very, I would say the environment is becoming more and more complex, because I will also say that the sort of these interactions that you have with the new types of identities coming into your ecosystem is not necessarily the same. As a small example, with with humans, when I have access to systems and data, generally I'm worried about who I am, what my level of authority is, whether I should be allowed to access something, not necessarily who has the ability to talk to me or who has access to me as an individual. Now, with AI agents and non-humans, and we'll talk more about it, but one of the interesting vectors that we see is that who has access to these AI agents or these non-human identities is also an interesting vector, because depending on who has access, they can actually change the trajectory of how that agent interacts with downstream systems or services, or what credentials they might have access to. That's like the complexity of management also is increasing, is what we see.
Yeah, and it seemed like single sign-on was going to solve a lot of this problem, right? Like even if I'm one click signing up for a new SaaS app, somebody would see that happen. There would be some governance process that would take place, and we even if it was after the employee already created the account at the application, like we could come behind, clean it up, make sure it's authorized and set up correctly and securely. Um, are you seeing anyone actually doing that? Or some of this application use happening with like personal accounts and things like that? Is there a visibility problem there for the enterprise?
I think again, it's a great question. I think the thing is that there are there are multiple patterns, and again, depending on industry and vertical, it changes. there are examples that we see at customers where not all the applications are, sort of integrated with even single sign-on, right? It happens when, like you gave an example earlier, like there is a trial happening or somebody's trying out applications or some capabilities, and you actually give access to your systems and data that is within the purview of that department. And so there are cases like that. There are cases where we have seen where a user could authorize an MCP. I know we are going a little ahead, but we've seen that users have authorized MCPs to access their own credentials. So now the user has passed credentials onto an MCP server or has configured that, and now what's happening is that data is being passed to a system like could be what we've seen is with Amazon Q business, and now you have no way to really tell whether it was the user logging in or whether it was the Amazon Q logging in on behalf of the user to access something. So we've seen multiple patterns. But coming back to your question of SSO, yes, I think it is definitely interesting in terms of how even just the authentication aspect, how does that evolve? Obviously, there are some very interesting frameworks that are out today, Spiffy and some of the others, where we are seeing some adoption there. We are seeing some usage, but I don't think that there is any universally adopted standards yet. There is also standards like Depop that are being used at certain enterprises, but I don't think there is any consistent answer yet on how we could protect login or authentication yet. And the only reason is because it is also new. So every enterprise is putting together, I will say, different frameworks. So there is no consistent pattern that we see yet, but I'm sure that will change.
Yeah. Yeah, and I saw something we talked about in my podcast last week is we saw the first case of an attack using command line agents like Q, ChatGPT, Claude Code, just taking advantage of that to basically build an info stealer. And one of the challenges of an attacker is they don't know your environment. I break into your system. I don't know where the important files are stored. I don't know how you've configured things. But now there's this agent sitting there waiting to help the attacker, right?
Yeah.
And you can just ask it, go find all the files that have cryptocurrency wallets in them, or credentials, API keys, tokens, stuff like that, and package it up and then put it here. Like, you just give the instructions to the agent and it can potentially go do that for you.
Yeah. That is, if you think about it, it is so, it is like I will say the duality of the power of AI, right? Like, I think great example that you cited there, because you do have AI being used almost everywhere. I will say, like, the adoption levels are different depending on the industry that you look at, but you have all of this power at somebody's disposal, and you are spot on that it is there to help the identity. But now you have almost two different ways to compromise that from an identity perspective. Number one, obviously, is just within the enterprise itself. You could have you could have an insider threat where they are using some sort of AI agents that are within the boundary of the enterprise, and then like you said, it's right there to help you along in whatever quest that you might have, right? And then in addition to that, now, previously, if I had access or I was able to compromise an individual's identity, and so you have an external threat actor who came into the enterprise through an identity attack, but now after that in addition to all the credentials that they might have access to, now they have a whole, like you said, like a whole army of AI agents there to help, along that threat vector. So you have threats in two aspects that you have to now protect against, now the human as well as the non-human. So it is definitely interesting. And again, what I am seeing is that everybody's excited about how AI can help users, but it is so important to think about what sort of mechanisms we have to govern and protect the enterprise from any sort of threats or attacks.
Right. In a threat landscape where, the typical type of attack we see is to steal someone's identity.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that was useful to that person, before the identity was stolen is going to be useful to the attacker, right? And it's going back to your point about, how do we distinguish? I told Amazon Q to do something versus I did it hands on keyboard. Like, is that something? Is that something where, do you see a field in the future where there's like AI yes or no, right? When we look at the audit logs for this, like how does that how do we address that, or is that unsolved at this point?
I think it's a little bit of a philosophical question, right? Like, to be frank, from I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know how it would evolve. Because I will say that generally, I think it's becoming okay that an individual uses, AI agents to do their, to work for them. I've seen this concept, obviously we've been hearing about this NHI to human ratio. It's a very common thing. Now I've heard, HAR, I think it's called, like human to agent ratio. And, it is ranging anywhere from 1:8 in, fields that are more creative, like, so for example, marketing and others, to like structured fields such as like, finance or compliance, where you could have almost a ratio of 1 human to 100 agents. The way that a lot of enterprises are treating this is no different than a manager having employees that work for them and do work with them. So I will say that it's okay that you have an AI agent to do work for you. But I think where things get very interesting, to your point, is the legal aspects, right? So if an agent does something untoward, my agent does something untoward, am I going to be held liable for that?
Yeah.
Those types of conversations are happening. There are obviously some interesting lawsuits that are out there on some of this, but I don't think that we have answers yet. But I could definitely see in certain industries where, AI is not allowed at all, and how can the applications, have, I will say, ability to protect against, or ability to at least have an audit to say that whether this was a human actor or an AI agent. And one other thing I did want to mention is, I also read an interesting paper on this, is, a few years ago, maybe like 3 years ago, biometrics was all the rage. So facial recognition, liveliness check at the time of authentication to identify whether this is a human. So it was all the rage. Now I read a very interesting paper about deepfakes. And so and how deepfakes are getting so good that they are able to trick some. They didn't mention which vendor it was, but they were able to deepfake, a liveliness check. And so it's interesting. What I've heard is that hardware tokens will come back. Back 20 years ago, everybody had hardware tokens to log in. Now that may come back, because that may be the only way to, kind of find out who is a human and who is, an AI agent.
Yeah, some of the most advanced identity verification vendors I've seen are completely reliant on consumer devices, right? On the phone in your pocket, because it does have like a depth sensor and infrared camera and things like that. You know, you know, apparently the most sophisticated tools we have are just the phones in our pockets, right? You know, for detecting liveliness. But but yeah, it's a challenge because then you always have to have a like my dad never got into smartphones. He still has a flip phone and he's very proud of it. You know, so you still have to have a process, you know, for that 1 to 5% of people that don't have an iPhone.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're right. Like user, that we are heavily reliant on devices to help us through this. But yeah, I think going back to what you said earlier, uh, I could definitely see how some enterprises, like there are critical infrastructure and things like that where they may never allow use of AI, at least through policy. But I don't know from a technology perspective what controls we would put in place to prevent that from happening. Certainly some sort of strong authentication mechanism, client side controls and things like that for sure. But I will say that it is an evolving landscape, and I think it will continue to evolve because you have, even today, I will say, we've all seen the Meta news and what they are doing, and then Anthropic responding to that, and OpenAI and whatnot. So now there is so much conversations around, what super intelligence, right, is what we are hearing. Like it's around the corner. It's in 2026 we shall see super intelligence. So I will say that technology and the capability of AI itself is evolving so quickly that all anything that we can do even right now, I think it'll continuously need to evolve over a period of time. It needs to keep up with the pace of innovation, and it is great that we are seeing all of this innovation. It's just we have to
Keeping
keep up.
up with it's going to be tough, though. You know, like we're talking about MCP today. We're going to talk more about MCP. It's not a year old yet. Like,
Yes.
I mean, it's still brand new. I feel like I'm the Luddite here, you know, because I haven't played with MCP yet, right? Like, I feel like I'm the only person in my peer group who hasn't played around with MCP servers and connected it to agents and things like that. In fact, I had a 5 hour drive yesterday, and I listened to a podcast called Shell Game, and this
Mhm.
journalist basically trained his voice using 11 Labs, and then
Okay.
connected it to phone number to phone services, and was just having it call like credit card companies, like customer service agents. Like sometimes it would get an AI agent, so it was AI talking to AI, and he gave it like minimal information for him, but he basically had it calling humans as him, you know, and some of them could tell it was a bot, and some of them couldn't, and he ran into a lot of weird problems. I mean, the main thing is it brings up this question of you know, when does do you need to do things directly, and what can you uh, not only practically but legally hand off your likeness to go do things for you. And like one of the interesting things he found is sometimes his AI agent would turn into the customer service agent, and because it was talking to a customer service agent, it just spontaneously decided to mirror the customer
Oh wow.
service agent. So it started asking the customer service agent, like it sounded like it was mocking the poor human on the other end of the phone. But yeah, there's all kinds of unintended consequences and weird stuff we're going to see as this technology develops for sure. So
Yeah.
moving away from some of the you know negative impacts here, like let's also talk about like you said, dual use technology. Like what are some of the cool things, some of the amazing things you're finding that AI can offer with identity security?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, it is it's a great question, first of all. And I will say that for all the me being like sounding negative, it's not, I think coming from the cyberspace and the cybersecurity space, it's just my mind is like always, how do I protect this? But you are right. Like there is so much power that the technology is evolving at such a fast pace that if you look at the power of AI, there are multiple. We could use that in multiple vectors. Let's start just by the power of discovery. You spoke about almost a shadow ID problem where somebody had used an app and then they decided to stop using. The app still had access to systems and data, which the enterprise may not have known about. Maybe and it's just sitting there. But now with AI, what we are seeing is that we are able to go and discover the landscape faster than we ever were able to. So previously it would take, year, 2 years just to identify what's the application landscape. Okay, enterprise using 5 different SSO solutions, because, they have been acquiring companies over a period of time through M&A, whatnot. So it's not like a single or one single sign-on solution. They have federated single sign-on, and there are applications that are not connected to single sign-on, applications that have local logins and things like that, or applications that don't use SSO, use Active Directory based login or credentials through that. So there were different, the landscape, the ability to discover the application landscape itself was a challenge, and then shadow IT was just exacerbating the problem. Now we have technology that could help discover the landscape much faster. And it's not just the application landscapes, it's also the identities. The same thing. How many contractors are working with you. So I would do this it was a party trick, like would go in and talk to a customer and say, hey, can you accurately tell me every single non-employee that has access to your systems? And we would ask them to guess, like, what is it? What's the number? What do you think?
Yeah.
They would give us a number, and in reality, the number would range anywhere from 3 to 15 times. And it was because in lines of businesses, bring on their own contractors, partners, vendors, suppliers. Customers didn't really have a good way to answer that. Now again, we have ways that you could go in and you could just assess that landscape much faster. So that's one area where we are seeing AI helping discover that landscape. Second big, I will say, area is just integration. If you've asked any, and I come from the implementation background, but if you go and ask any customer, what's the most expensive part of an identity security implementation, they would say all the integrations. Integrating with all the systems, quote unquote, all would take years, and now what we are seeing is that you have the ability for AI to do a lot of that grunt work, where you take minimal input from the business and then let AI powered onboarding integrate with the applications and integrate with the infrastructure. And now that time to integrate is being cut to the point of anywhere from like 60 to 90%, depending on depending on, again, the complexity of the application, complexity of the integration. For example, AWS, I will say, is easy, but like a homegrown green screen application might be a little bit more complex. So it just depends. And then I will say, sorry, go ahead.
Just to dive a little bit deeper there, what is some of that work that AI is doing? What does some of that look like? Is it saying, trying to match fields from one system to another, like, this is full name, but we call it something different here. This is job description here, but we call it something like what is that kind of work that AI is doing for us to cut down that implementation time?
I would say the answer is, in Reddit, Stellar editor, is yes. Is all of it. Like, anywhere where, humans were having to make decisions, all of that decisioning is going to get simplified. So every aspect. So today, if you were to, just even bring in data from the most common, I will say, HR sources, like, you have Success Factors or Workday or, PeopleSoft, very commonly used across enterprises. Today, almost everywhere, just to bring in the data, you have decisions that need to be made in terms of, hey, what attributes do I bring in? Should I bring in, you know, uh, there are some standard attributes. Obviously, every customer will have their own. Question is what attributes. Today, a human is making a lot of that decision. Now, AI will generally say that, what we have seen is a pattern where, almost every customer is using these 17 fields, and then these are optional, but we also see these other 50 fields being used. So these are total of 67 fields that we recommend that you start with. Now, something like that would probably take 3 hours for somebody to do. Here is just 2 clicks, and then you move forward. You can always come back and change it, but now you have a starting point, which I will say is going to be good enough, because otherwise you have a human making a decision, and for that human is going to go talk to 5 people, and now you have a baseline to start with. Let's say you bring in the data, and then tomorrow you see some of those fields are not supplying data. AI will learn and say, hey, these fields are not, sending any data. We recommend you trying these other 6 fields. So it is going to be learning based on not just the data that it is seeing from that customer, but also, as other customers are evolving their implementation, it's constantly learning. So the AI, I will say, is going to act like the smartest human in the loop, right? And you have the ability to always rely on that smartest, I will say, identity. That's why I call it a human, but the smartest identity in the loop, and you can always ask it and help and use its help to make those decisions much simpler. So that's where, and yes, like things like attribute mapping, or one of the things that we are using AI for, an example is just reading documentation. If there is a application where it has APIs for provisioning things into it or synchronizing information, we would typically have somebody read the documentation and say, okay, this post API is what we will use to push information. But what we are using AI for is we've been asking customers to just plug in the documentation URL. AI reads the documentation, and it doesn't ask the human for any information apart from just showing that, hey, these are the 5 APIs that we're going to use to integrate with the app. So it's as simple as that.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of professional services that potentially it replaces there. Because a lot of those integrations, like that, often be a third party that you would hire to come in and do that for you. So, could potentially save a lot of money here in doing some of that work.
No, for sure. And I think, some of the, we routinely have this conversation where whenever we talk about this, some of our partners are like, this is going to, replace us. Actually, we don't see it happening that way, because what we have seen is like in 3 years, 3-year implementations, we are only able to cover 30-40% of the landscape, right? And there is so much that we haven't done. So what we see changing is that the work, first of all, happens much faster. But the second thing is that previously all of the coding that people used to code and develop, all of that switches to being like prompt engineering. Like, how do you work with the AI? How do you understand what it needs? How do you focus on the aspects that are more advisory in nature? Your job shifts from actually coding to
it's an abstraction layer, right?
It's abstraction layer. It's no different. It is no different than what our developers internally are doing. Like, they are still writing code, but they are starting with prompts, versus starting with a line of code. They are starting with a prompt to Amazon Q, or whatever LLM that is being used. We are heavy users of Amazon Q internally, but we also have some other LLMs in place. So yeah.
Right. All right. So earlier I kind of interrupted you. You're going through I think a list of different places that we're seeing AI come into identity security. We covered I think just all the uncaptured applications, and then got into integrations. I don't know if you had anything else on that list that you hadn't gotten to that you wanted to cover.
Yeah, I think the other aspect, and I think actually it was a good segue. Your question was a great segue. Is where can AI help? Mm-hmm. Basically, AI will help in every single aspect wherever there is human interaction needed or human input needed. Today, as just a consumer of AI, where I use AI day to day, I have my mental model has shifted to asking AI. So when I'm planning just the itinerary, I can go and research it myself, but I generally ask Perplexity or ChatGPT, like, hey, make me an itinerary for 3 days. I use it as a starting point. Similar to that, if you think about it, all the decisions that a human would make in the system, and there's a lot, like whether there's a CISO trying to figure out what does their overall landscape look like, or it might be a security analyst trying to find the next threat that they need to act on. Today, we see all of those interactions changing, and that's all of those interactions where a human had to go and hunt and fish for things. AI is going to act as an enabler throughout that experience. So everywhere there's a human interaction, could be the smallest, like thing like approving somebody's access, or requesting some sort of access to a server, that would change. That those interactions would change. I'll take an example. We have obviously a lot of customers who are privileged access, are PAN customers, and they are saying that, okay, how can I get access to servers and systems and log in? Now we are exploring cases of actually actioning what access was basically what they were asking for, but now they are asking to execute services directly, to say, hey, go restart a production server. It has to start with figuring out what the hell is a production server. Then I has to figure out, okay, I need access to that production server. Then I need to log in and then execute a script. So it would be like 3 or 4 things that a user would have to do. Now they're just asking for, hey, a prompt. And then the system has to help go execute all of these different tasks and orchestrate all of these different. So all of these interactions are going to change over a period of time, and it's a good thing. And you use the example of flip phones, but all the kids that are graduating college this year, trust me, the way that they interact with software is going to be very different 2 years from now. So all of these kids will join these enterprises as developers, as analysts, and they will have a completely different expectation from a identity security system. So, AI is helping move all of those experiences along as well.
Yeah, so a few things you mentioned there, I wanted to dive into a little deeper, and hopefully maybe this will be a good segue to your demo. I haven't seen the demo yet, but I think it might be in that, if I'm asking AI to do something to a production system, and speaking of Pam, one of the concerns there is I'm not sure I want an AI agent that has access to all production systems all the time, right? Like what is the plan there? Is it some kind of like just-in-time, token assignment type of thing? Because obviously that's going to be an attacker's first, or only like one-stop shop for anything that they need to do. If there's this agent sitting there that can do anything I want it to do to production systems.
Yeah, no, I think your question is, AI is so powerful. So there is that aspect. And then now, how do we then get our arms around this problem of security and like making sure that we are able to responsibly use AI? So I think, first of all, that there are a lot of theoretical, I will say, implementations that are being proposed, like, in terms of how you secure AI. One thing I will say, just talking to customers and looking at their journey, it's all over the place. There are customers that we see who have been asked to protect already implemented AI services. So they have already brought on AI agents, they've implemented Crew AI, and they've used Amazon's Bedrock, created AI applications. And now the identity teams are told, hey, we have all of this. We want to make sure that, we have the right framework for it. But they've already exposed that AI agents and services to their end users and business users. So now you have the identity teams trying to figure out how to protect this. And you said that you have not yet played around with MCP, but you're not the only one. Our customers are coming to us saying that I have no idea what to do here, and then it's more of like trying to understand and work with them. So there is that aspect. And then there are customers who are way more risk averse, and they are like, hey, before we do anything, we want to put together a framework. So help us create that framework. So there are customers that are in different stages, and that's perfectly normal because it's all so new. But I think, the way to think about it conceptually is, first of all, before I can do anything, I need to have visibility to it. So I need to, first of all, have a way to understand my landscape. So it sounds simplistic. It's not that easy because, you will see that discovering AI agents and MCP servers is not so straightforward. But, the first thing I will say is going to start with visibility. Visibility of not just what's in your infrastructure or in your landscape, but also visibility of what they can do, what the AI agents have access to, whether that be credentials, whether that be knowledge bases, or an AI agent acting on behalf of somebody, what tools and resources that they might have access to. So there is that, visibility, I will say, is going to be, the most important. And there are different aspects to AI. For example, guardrails. Many of these AI platforms come with guardrails. But what we are seeing as we do a discovery, we have our identity security posture management through which we are going and discovering AI agents. What we are seeing is that even though a lot of the AI platforms allow for guardrails to be implemented just as one way to implement policy, what we are seeing is that those guardrails are not uniformly defined. So you have AI agents without any sort of guardrails. So, but you wouldn't know that unless you had visibility to it. So the first aspect I would say is visibility. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because you don't know what controls to build after that. Unless
Yeah.
you understand how this is being used. Like for a lot of organizations, like I hear a lot of things where organizations are struggling to get value out of a lot of AI tools. And I think that's somewhat because they're just deploying the tools without any plan, without any goals, not giving employees any kind of prompt training. So it's funny that the technology that solves the blank page problem has a blank page problem where people are like, okay, like it can do all these amazing things, but where do I get started? What kinds of tasks should I consider automating with these? There's already like over 1,000 MCP servers out there. Well, even just conceptually understanding what an MCP server is. So almost even before visibility, there's just this understanding of what is this technology and what can I do with it. But then certainly as things start getting deployed in the enterprise, you need to already have that understanding to put into context. Okay, this developer, they're using MTP servers in this app, they're testing it out, and you have to know what that means, what an MCP server means, because like the first time I heard that term, I thought, okay, is this like a container? Does it have its own network stack, right? But it seems like it's just like I said, I haven't played with it yet, but it seems like it's just a piece of code that's like an API type connector between an agent and something else.
Yeah, you're right. Like the way the analogy that I use is like, MCP, securing MCP is like securing the pipeline and the infrastructure in within your house. Like, you have, your electricity, your plumbing, all of that, going through it, that all of that plumbing talk, how your house is being powered is MCP. Basically, it's the protocol that is powering your entire house, whether that's your plumbing, your electrics, all of that is basically the MCP.
Yeah.
And then when you
HVAC,
talk about all of that, exactly, it's all the plumbing, right? That is powering the entire thing. But if I think of the entire house as AI powered, then like if you're trying to protect AI, that's the whole house. You have so much more beyond MCP that you need to protect and manage. Is the whole house, the keys, how do you get in, the windows, do you have this right security in place, because somebody could get in through 5 different ways. So yes, you are right there. And I think even to take a step back from what we are doing, like let's take a step back from what we are doing as a company. Let's just talk a little bit about AI agents and what enterprises should be doing. There's a lot that they could do, but I will say that there are I will say 3 or 4 things that are very important. First thing is that setting clear purpose and boundary for the agents. It's so important. That's the first thing. Is why is an AI agent or AI being used for what purpose, and what constraints can you put in place? Second thing that a customer should be doing, any enterprises should be doing, this is nothing about identity security. This is about AI, right? Second is about the risk and impact, right? If an AI agent were to go rogue for whatever reason, prompt injections could be the reason, could be hallucinations, could be any reason, but what is the impact of an AI agent going rogue? Assuming that goes rogue, what would be the worst that could happen? Third thing would be transparency in terms of audit trail of who, let's say, asked an AI agent to do something, and where did the execution stop or start. Now the how it's done is not important, but we need to start with a larger objective that we have to have that explainability or that transparency. And then the fourth thing I will say would be your control mechanisms. And that's where you were asking, what sort of controls would I have in place? There are lots of things that we could do, like guardrails, depop, ability to, we could have strong cryptographic mechanisms to verify non-human identity. There are a lot that we could do, but those are the guardrails that we would put in place. And, then we would have more sophisticated things in place. But I will say this is where any enterprise should start with these 3 or 4 things in, I will say, in priority order. And speaking of what we typically see this problem, we look at this problem in 3 different buckets. I spoke about the fact that you need to have visibility, but if I were to again elevate that problem a little bit, we think of the problem in the buckets of posture. So do you have an accurate posture of how your AI agents are, or AI in general is working in your environment, including let's say MCP servers and whatever other technologies might be in your ecosystem. The second problem that we see is in the case of identity management. So an AI agent coming online, coming offline, or who is the owner for this AI agent? Could be a group of individuals who's the owner. So there's that management piece. So that's that second bucket. And the third bucket,
it's almost asset management, right?
Exactly.
With it's a new kind of asset, and you need to know who the owner is.
Exactly. You need to know who the owner is, who's acting, and it gets very complex because in advanced workflows, you could literally have an AI agent talking to another AI agent through what we call A2A, agent to agent communication, and then an AI agent talking to a backend service through an MCP, which is a different model of interaction. So you have agents talking to other agents, and another agent could be talking to an MCP. And it was Adrian who told the original AI agent to go do something. Now it has gone and done something in system number 53. But the provenance of who authorized that agent to act, that the provenance is so important in the context of AI, because as soon as we see a lawsuit that an AI agent acted, who authorized it will be the question. And I think we will start to see that evolving. So there is that management aspect, which is the ownership, registration, taking agents that have been idle for a while offline. So you'll see that management aspect. And last but not the least, we see it in the access bucket. That's where your questions of how do we authenticate the agent? How do we get privileged access to the agent? Do we give a short-lived token? Is there other ways to authenticate? So we see that problem in 3 different buckets, and we are trying to solve for this problem in all 3 different buckets. And again, there are different implementations in each area that we have to do to really protect AI.
Yeah, I think you actually did a pretty good job there in answering my earlier question of how do we know it was Amazon Q and not Adrian who did that action? And and the answer is, there's going to be an audit log from Amazon Q somewhere that's integrated into our visibility of what's going on. And but suffice to say, however you build it, it should be easy to answer that question. We need it, so that's that. What would you call it? Transparency that we need there. We need to know if this was the product of hallucination,
Yes.
machine hallucination or human hallucination. Because maybe something bad happened, and is Adrian. Well, the question of legal liability, that's a different podcast altogether, or a different webcast altogether. But yeah, the base requirement is the ability to answer that question before
Yes.
you even get to anywhere else. So we have some interesting questions here in the chat that I want to run through, and I want to make sure we have enough time for your demo as well, because that might
Sure.
generate some more questions. So one of our attendees asks, is there an automated way to estimate the security IQ of AI? I know we have a lot of benchmarks out there for AI that are almost literally like looking for some kind of intelligence quotient, but I've not seen anything specifically for security. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I would say it
Um,
depends on the task, right?
yeah,
Like what you're using it for.
yeah, I think it depends on the task. And I think going back to the first thing is what is the use case, right? Look, I understand how we use AI in our personal lives is different, but in the context of enterprises, I think, what an AI agent is authorized and supposed to do is important context, because that's where you will be able to ascribe some sort of security value to it. There are frameworks already in place, a lot of frameworks in place. There could be compliance governance frameworks that could be used for that. But if we do not know with what context that AI agent was operating, it's really hard to say why an AI agent went and did something. And then the best thing we could do is to trace it back to the individual and try to figure out, okay, what and why did something happen. But it's an interesting concept. I think it's evolving. I'm sure we'll see something soon. Maybe we'll contribute to creating something. But yeah, I haven't seen
Well,
anything.
I imagine everybody in a product position like you, or maybe somewhere within software engineering, building AI features for their security product, has to choose foundation models, right? Like
Yes.
there has to be some process to determine, okay, this is a little bit better at this, and maybe you end up using a mix of models, because one
Yeah.
model is better at one task than another. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Yeah, and I will say that customers are asking us, and we have not yet allowed it, but customers are asking to bring their own models. So as a
Oh, interesting.
company, we we don't we have taken a very strong stance in the context of AI that all our LLMs are private LLMs for the customer. So the training data, the base training data is ours, but after that the AI cannot learn across customers. So anything it learns is only from that customer's context. So now the customers are asking us that can we just bring our own model. So we will allow that in the future, because like you said, there might be specific model that customers want to use, or models that they use internally that are more suited for the types of interactions that they want to execute, or data that is more relevant for them. So we would allow that. So for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And then another question here: if we use AI for identity proofing, how do we handle the injection of false data into the AI data space? So, maybe it's a question about indirect prompt injection here.
So let me just understand the question. Is AI for identity proofing? You mean like
Hmm.
somebody spoofing identity proofing? Is that? I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, Barry can elaborate if he wants in the chat, but that's how it was written.
Okay, I have to go back and read the chat. I can't find the question button, but I think it's interesting, because what we are seeing already is in IDV, basically identity verification. Obviously, biometrics is important, but usually biometrics is matched with a BioGov ID. So the use case that I was talking about wasn't that the BioGov ID, which is like a driver's license or a passport, that wasn't fake. But after the initial verification, when the authentication was happening, somebody had pointed the phone camera to a laptop screen, and the laptop screen basically had somebody's deep fake. So that was the use case. So it wasn't so much that somebody compromised both like my identity as well as my passport. It was that they had a deep fake good enough to be able to spoof my face. But I will say that in the case of identity verification as well, there are again some very interesting technological improvements that are happening, including like hardware fingerprint readers. Again, that is today. I'm hearing that already there are physical AI is also going to be the next big thing. So up until AI gets so good that they can spoof fingerprints, but like at least today there are technologies like fingerprint readers, etc., also that are being used for identity verification purposes by many vendors. So
yeah, I think captchas have basically been rendered useless as well, and AI using computers is a thing now as well, like using a mouse, using a keyboard, for things that don't have APIs, so computer vision. But we only have a few minutes left, so I think it's demo time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, this is just an example of what we are doing with posture. So let me show that over here. You should be seeing my screen, right?
There it is. Yeah, I see a slide. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this was more not this is the demo of like our posture management, specifically around AI. And what you'll see over here is on the top you have different types of identity: the workforce, external, non-human, and agent. Customers always ask me, like, isn't AI agent a type of non-human identity? And the answer is
right. That was going to be my first question.
The answer is always a resounding yes. However, AI agents bring together a whole host of different models. So we made sense to have that as a separate bucket, just because the type of management that you would do for agents would be different, no different from external. Both your workforce users and external users are humans, but the type of controls you will have for your external populations, like a partner supplier, will be different from your employees. So it's kind of like the same concept. But I'll let the demo play. But the first thing is, like I said, you have the visibility to different types of tools or MCPs that you might have, as well as findings against those that we would ingest and tell. So in this case, for example, it is showing that there may be owners that are not existent, or for example, in this case, for these are the different agents that are in different statuses, failed, prepared, and whatnot. And again, you can see what guardrails are assigned to that AI agent, or for example, different timelines in terms of attributes being added or access being added to the agent and whatnot. The same concept applies to like all the MCP servers that are registered. And again, you could see sort of the tools that are exposed via those MCP servers. And, at this point, it's just a visibility aspect, but you could be able to take action right from here, right? Or you could, for example, start by, registering data, or you could, go and say that I want to go and get information from an MCP, server. So, there are different ways in which that data can be, ingested, but it is an example of us bringing that visibility to the table. Or, we could also do the same thing with agents and tell you the access chain of like who is the individual accessing the agent, and again, what downstream access that agent might have. So again, just a quick 1 minute, demo of, what could be done with the platform. And this is an
Mhm.
example of MCP, very similar demos that you could go to our website and see around, AI agent security as well. And over there, it's, like I said, it's more complex because that chain starts with the individual, the agent, and you could have owners of agents too. So somebody registers the agent who's the owner, but anybody could use it. So it starts with finding and posture, and then again being able to do management for it, and last but not the least, how do you provide secure access to those AI agents or to those MCP servers. Hope that it's a good overview.
Yeah, there's so much stuff to think around. I think this has helped me a lot with my mental framing of how to think about agents and MCP. The demo I think helped a lot. Sometimes just seeing the data structured,
Yeah.
within a UI can help so much. But Anirudh, thank you so much for joining me today. This I think was very helpful, and judging from the amount of interaction from the audience, I think it was helpful for the audience as well.
Thank you.
Big thanks to our sponsor, Savient, for making today's webcast possible. And again, big thanks to the audience for joining us. Thanks for all the great questions and interactions, and we hope to see you next time.